Good evening, everyone. Welcome to today's edition of the Policy Subcommittee meeting. It's going to be a bit of a briefer meeting because we have a full school committee meeting beginning at 6. So why don't we get started with the minutes? Have they been reviewed?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Would someone like to move the minutes?
I will move the minutes.
All right. Thank you, Val. Is there a second?
I'll second them.
Thank you, Stephen. Stephen, your vote?
Yes.
Valerie?
Yes.
And I also vote yes. So that will bring us to our first substantive agenda item for the evening, which is a discussion and possible vote of the Life of the Schools inclusion policy. There have been many draft updates to this policy. I think it would be most helpful if Betsy, perhaps you could put up the Mariah draft, which also includes some of my modifications.
David, we have a lot of people here for wellness. Is it possible to flip the two?
Sure, we can do that. Let's go ahead with wellness.
Because they're going to leave and have dinner and then come back for the big school committee. So,
All right, that's fine. So I'm going to go ahead with wellness. Would someone like to present the wellness draft?
Sasha, you want to do it? I'm putting you on the spot.
everybody's keeping on staying up.
Make some slides. Maybe I could, Sasha, do you want me to start the slides while you're finding and I can share my screen? Does that, I can see.
Carlin share her screen. I'm sorry, can Carlin share her screen?
Yes, everyone can share their screen. Yeah.
Share, Carlin.
Would that be helpful, Sasha? And then we can't hear you, Sasha. And then Trisha, you and Sasha can just jump in. I'll just quickly start with my slideshow. So we just made a couple quick slides just to sort of give a little bit of a quick overview. And then Sasha made a really wonderful comparison document between the policy from 2018 and the updated policy. The slides will be shared with you as well, but we had a number of members of our committee. It's been a couple-year process, and it started back in 2021 when we had a convening of the initial committee, and we went through a group of assessments, and then we had quarterly meetings where we broke up into smaller groups to work on the different parts of the policy. And we have finished a sort of an updated draft of the policy for your review going forward. There's a full comparison table, which I believe, and Suzanne, you can tell us, was that shared with all the committee, the comparison table?
Yes, yes, it was.
So that comparison table really does divide everything up really well and sort of shows you what was changed. But basically, the main chunks of the policy are sort of food services, some parts about food at school events, and then nutrition education, health and physical education, as well as physical activity, and then social emotional learning. And I will stop sharing my screen there, as I think it might be a good idea for Sasha to go over some of the food service changes. And then we can go through the rest of the slides as we go through. Is that helpful? I'm seeing nodding heads. Okay.
Okay.
Sasha, now I'll hand it off to you.
Okay, I'll share my screen. Would you like to go over the comparison chart, because it does help?
That would be great.
Yeah, I think if you go with the things that you put in blue, you don't, in the hard copy, you don't have that.
I'm glad that you said that.
Online, you've added or what's different is in blue.
Okay, I got it. There we go. I'll share my screen. Right. So most of the policy information that was in the previous policy, well, let me back up a bit. We did an initial review of the policy for compliance with the new USDA regulations. From time to time, those are updated. In the initial review, we looked at whether the current wellness policy met the local, state, and federal guidelines. And any section of that policy that did not meet those standards, we were required to make updates to be in compliance. So a lot of the, most of our policy was, but time has changed, and there are some areas of the policy that we saw that either it didn't exist in the existing policy or it needed to be updated. A lot of those regulations were through I wouldn't say much in food services, because much of the policy was this wellness policy is food service heavy, and it was built at a time when a lot of focus was on compliance with those USDA regulations. A lot has not changed, although recently, and I just learned this today, that the JSI, the John Stalker A-list has been updated. So we may have to go back and look at some of the things to ensure that that list is fully in compliance. It wouldn't change the policy, because we do agree that we will follow, our policy specifically states that we will follow the John Stalker A-list policy, and that is the snack policy. As you can see, most of the policy or most of the changes happens in terms of compliance and local and state guidelines, not necessarily federal guidelines. The first section of the policy that changed was the food service environment. We are required by USDA to ensure that we are providing potable water in all the schools and during all the lunch session. That is one of the items that was not specifically listed in the policy. Even though it wasn't listed, we were in compliance because the food service department understands these regulations and understand through DESI reviews that we have to provide these policies. Some of the things that we might be seeing in the policy that needed updates, it didn't mean that we were not in compliance. It just meant that it wasn't a documented policy. And this was one of them. While most schools have a bubbler in the cafeteria, which would meet that standard or that regulation. So that is the first section, and it changed, or we updated it, because this is a USDA regulation or requirement. And I think I keep going down. Meal access is another section of our policy that we made some changes. And this was as a result of the new Massachusetts Universal School Meal Guidelines. And that just recently passed, so that would never have been included in a previous policy. Currently, we are, as most people know, I'm a huge fan of universal school meals. Massachusetts permanently passed the universal school meal policy, where all students will receive a free breakfast, lunch, and snack permanently, regardless of whether or not they qualify for that meal. So that is one of the section that is updated. It is also important to know that even though there is universal school meals, a free and reduced status is not only to receive that benefit, but also for families to gain additional benefits. There are huge benefits associated with anyone qualifying for a free and who think they may qualify for free and reduced meals to continue to submit those applications. Some of the things we remove is certifying students or overtly identifying students at the cash register, how we would differentiate those. We took those out because that is not the likelihood of that happening because of universal school meal. That is no longer a requirement or an issue that we would face. I think the other section we updated was the meal time. And even though it wasn't explicitly stated in the previous policy that students will at least have a specific time. It is a requirement for students to have at least 20 minutes of time to eat after school meals are served. This will allow time for students to get their lunch and sit and eat it. I know that we've added, and the adding of strive to at least accomplish that is very important to state explicitly that we do and we are continuously striving to ensure that once kids are served their meals, they have 20 minutes to eat it. But there are a lot of things that are associated with making that possible, which it includes infrastructure, school day, and things like that, which even accomplishing it a portion or a section of the time would continue to be a challenge. We will always strive to get there someday. And it's even more difficult with the increased participation. The district is experiencing almost a 50 to 60% participation across the district in school meals. So that comes with a lot of challenges. That's the beauty of universal school meals. You have more kids participating. Another important factor, and this was because of universal school meals, students are now, the governor requires that we do, once we're serving school meals, universal school, once we're serving school, operating the national school lunch program, every school district operating the national school lunch program is required to operate the national school breakfast program. So, and ensuring that students have access to breakfast. For us, it was always an equity issue. We want to make sure that every student have an opportunity to participate in the program. So stating it in our policy was very important. So it wasn't explicitly stated in the previous policy. Now we have it documented. It is now a state requirement because of the updates to the school lunch program through universal school meals. And this is to provide, we stated that this is to provide all students access to a healthy breakfast during the school day, hopefully incorporating breakfast after the bell programs. Another important insert into the policy or update is to also link, because the school committee passed the sustainability policy, and a lot of the sustainability, a lot of items in that sustainability policy does affect food services. It was also important to incorporate that policy in the school wellness policy. So that is what we did. We added that we would implement and adhere to the policies outlined in the district's school sustainability policy, which was passed in last year, I think it was. We also stated that we'd provide adequate communication about the program through various means, including social media. I thought a lot of our panelists, a lot of our committee members thought that it was important to state that in a policy, that it is almost a requirement. We have to find ways to get and reach our student population. And one of the things we did, while we had these policies, this was in the policy, we just updated the links to the policy to make it the current links. The previous links that were in the previous school wellness policy were broken, so we added and updated those links. And as you can see, most of it is black. So that means a lot of the previous policy was in compliance. There are a few adjustments or changes that we needed to make. Let me see. Am I done? I think my computer froze. Sorry.
Do you want to stop sharing, Sasha, and I can share and we can just.
Okay, go
scroll
ahead.
through? Hold on.
So we're about a third of the way through.
Okay.
Yes,
And
I can- do you want
in
me-
terms of pages, I don't know in terms of talking, but in terms of pages. Is David still online or no?
I'm here, yes.
Okay, so David, I don't know, how you want to proceed, if you want us just to plow through this, or what is your vision? We're
Well,
about
what
a
I
third of the way through.
perhaps if you could just sort of summarize the highlights for you in terms of what's been changed.
Well, that's what we're doing.
No, I understand that, but going even faster so that then we can get some input from committee members.
I can be really fast. Sasha, do you want to just?
I
try to-
can go really quickly about the important points that change in food service, other than the just wordsmithing and updating language. I think one of the things that changed is the implementation of the sustainability policy, which we already discussed,
Yeah.
and adding school breakfast program, having a specific time for school meals, or incorporating school breakfast after the bell program into incorporating breakfast into the school day. Currently, breakfast is before the start of the school day, so we're incorporating breakfast into the school day. We also updated fundraising practices, the quality of food that we're serving. We agreed to serve high nutrient dense organic food as much as possible. We also highlighted in food service adhering to any policy that, whether it's USDA, local, or whether it's federal, state, or local, whichever policy is the stricter is the one that food service will adhere to. Right, I think that's it.
I think that was it, Sasha. In the snacks program, I feel like you just made sure it aligned with the current.
Yes,
Yeah.
the current snack, the updated snack list. Thanks.
No problem. So I can quickly jump in. I'll cover nutrition education as well as physical education, health education. Not much change in the nutrition education piece. What the biggest piece that changed, I think, for us was that we now have the new Massachusetts Comprehensive Health and Physical Education frameworks, which actually align quite nicely with this policy, and all the outlined nutrition education that was already in the policy is actually supported by the frameworks, because a lot of the frameworks address nutrition education K1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I was actually happy to see that. So I linked the new frameworks into this comparison table as well. The other thing we did was we did a little bit of wordsmithing and cleaning up of the document, making sure that whatever we say we do in the policy aligns with what we're doing right now. For instance, we offer physical education at every grade level as well as at the high school. And we have a required course for ninth graders called Lifetime Wellness. That's part of a graduation requirement. So we just made sure that the document was, our current practices, but we also made sure that there was opportunity for growth. But we worded it in a way that made it so that we weren't locking into something that we couldn't actually implement. And I would just say that quickly in terms of the physical education, nutrition education, there's not as much blue as well, but there was just a couple, areas where we made sure that it said, lifetime wellness is required for graduation. We talked a little bit about having highly qualified physical education, health education teachers, and making sure that they were the people implementing the curriculum. One place we did make sure that we were explicit was that we aim to implement a comprehensive K through 12 health education program. Currently, we do not have health education K through 12, but we are hoping to prioritize sixth grade, add sixth grade first, sort of cover that gap that we have now between the fifth grade intra-adolescence we do in fifth grade, and then we sort of have nothing in sixth grade, and build upon that. So we noted that in the policy as well, utilizing a skills-based approach to health education, which aligns with the national standards and the state standards. And I made sure that I put a point in. There was a lot in this section about physical activity and daily recess and physical activity, which is great. Students and children should move, a lot during their school day. But I just want to make sure that that is not replacing physical education, because physical education and health education are, educational classroom environments. So that can be added on, but I don't want that to be in place of. So I just have to make sure that I note that. And then team, am I forgetting anything? There was some stuff about sort of intramural and extramural sports. We just made sure that that was aligning with what we're doing and what we can continue to offer the public schools as students. I think that's about it. Suzanne, you were on this with me. You were on this subcommittee with me. Am I missing anything, or am I
No, you
forgetting
just,
to mention
that
anything?
number 4, the integrating movement throughout the school day. I think that's a slightly new emphasis, again, not to replace physical education or recess, but just be encouraged throughout the day to, especially the younger kids, take movement breaks. So,
Yeah, I think it actually was in the original policy, and there was a
Okay.
whole, it was changed in our new draft to come after physical education, health education. So it was sort of moved down, but this concept of Tabatas and movement breaks and kinesthetic learning, absolutely, we want to keep that going. And we will, my team, as well as all the other leaders, will help to make sure that we're, trying to integrate movement throughout the students' experience, because 2 days a week of physical education is definitely not enough. So we will make sure that kids are moving every day. Great. With that, I think I see Matt on here. Matt, do you want me to pass it off to you for?
Yeah,
SE?
sure. Yep. And I can be relatively brief. So you're going to definitely see more information in this section than in the previous policy. And a lot of that is reflecting work that we are already doing, and definitely what we've come to understand about what kids need in order to promote their wellness. The big changes or sort of additional information you're going to see is more referencing a more active approach to supporting kids' wellness and social emotional learning. You're going to see more information around targeting belonging as a thing for students, and then specific education around the impact of social media on kids' wellness, and also more responsive and prevention-based supports around substance use. So those are sort of the big things that you'll see different within this section.
Matt, can I just ask you about that? I
Yeah.
saw reference to social media in the first section. Is there any reference to it elsewhere? I guess I could just do a document search.
But I think it's just in that, and I'm looking at it right now too. I think it's in that, just in that first part there.
It's in the frameworks for health education around media literacy pieces, as well as there is some pieces in the crosswalks for the digital literacy and technology. In the DESE frameworks, there's crosswalks between the new health frameworks and some of the digital safety pieces. And that's part of the intentionality about wanting to add sixth grade health is we desperately want to make sure that we're sort of doing some of that, especially around digital safety, social media, digital citizenship work earlier.
Yeah, I was saying in the second, in number 2 within the SEL section, you'll see we tried to, in understanding what kids are really needing right now and the things that are really impacting their wellness, we tried to articulate sort of in that second paragraph there, the things that we're really seeing impacting kids' wellness. That's what we're trying to, that's the primary area where that comes out.
Okay, almost done.
All right, anything else in the wellness policy?
I think the last section really just goes into a little bit of the implementation and evaluation of the policy, which we have done, but it hasn't ever been explicitly addressed. So we just wrote it into the policy, which is a requirement of the policy. So our coach helped us with some of that language and basically doing the triennial progress evaluation as we did for this, and going through the steps that we've done to update and stay current with requirements. And some of the things that we have to do are communicate our policy broadly, share it with folks at the beginning of the school year, have it posted where it's easy for people to find, and set up some things to be sure that we're following the policies that we've enacted.
All right.
So just one thing to think about is, is there an impact on the budget? I think most of it is not going to impact the budget because we're already doing a lot of it. We just had to put it in policy. But Carlin, is there some thought that there might be a budget request around the health education or?
Yes, I mean, if we add the sixth grade health, there will be a budget impact, but I believe, we're having conversations about how we can best utilize our staffing to make sure that we can, add sixth grade health with the least amount of budget impact. But I do also, when we talked, Tricia mentioned a little bit about implementing and, the next steps. And I think that's part of the reason why we want to, make some choices now so that we can best prepare all of our school leaders and everyone as we go into planning and scheduling and figuring out, middle school schedules and what it's going to look like. Matt and I have been collaborating, as well as Tricia and I, for, the last few years around lots of wellness pieces. I know Matt and I have had to do, some of the preventative stuff, the screenings and the YRBS study and a lot of the other work around. We're on a lot of committees where we get a lot of information. So we know that now we have a need. And I think it's time for us to start to meet that need with some prevention education, with some interventions, with some, opportunities to make sure that we're helping our students develop these health skills.
And then also in terms of financial implications, my understanding is that one of the reasons why there was a little bit of urgency in having this heard today, or before we get to finalizing the budget for next year, which of course is a multi-month process, but well underway. Are there any other specific asks that you can think of beyond in health education? And wellness?
Team, I don't
think so.
Okay. All right, subcommittee.
I was muted. I think she was
Oh,
trying.
sorry, you have something to add, Tricia?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, we were pretty careful with our language in a lot of cases, striving for and being aspirational, being very mindful that there's so much that is great and everything can't be done. So we tried to be cautious with that. But I think that, as Carlin said, the wellness education is the big ticket item.
All right. Now I know that we have a student on, Ezra Kleinbaum, who he had a couple of suggestions. I'd like to go to him.
Can I just make a comment first? This is great, by the way. It's such a huge amount of work was clearly put into this revision. I just want to make a proposal that the goal section replace that text with the new goal number 6 for Brookline, which explicitly references wellness. And is the ethic of wellness. I think it's directly relevant. And I think by tying it to our new goal number 6, it's
Our district goals,
what was that?
our district goals.
Our district goal number 6.
Yeah.
I think it will be mutually reinforcing, and it'll be more powerful for both the district goal and for this policy goal.
I think that's a great idea.
I think that's a great idea too.
Go ahead, Ezra.
Can you hear me?
We can, yes.
All right. Hi, everybody. Ezra Kleinbaum here. I'm a junior at Brookline High School. For those who don't know me, I'm a member of the PSP Sustainability Task Force, and I was a member of the Brookline Composting Advisory Committee back when that was a thing. And I do apologize if there's some background noise. I'm zooming in today from a track meet, as I am a member of the track team. First, I just want to thank everybody who has spent the last 2 years working on this policy. It seems really incredible overall, and I really appreciate all of the thought and effort and everything that's gone into that. And I apologize that I'm jumping into this process a little bit late. But for the past 2 and change years now, I have been working with the Food Services Department to expand access to plant-based foods within public schools of Brookline cafeterias, which are so important both for student health and for the environment. And it's an equity issue as well. Students who are vegetarian and vegan and, require lactose intolerant, allergic to eggs, whatever other reason, more kids can eat plant-based foods. But when my team of students and I first reached out to Sasha about expanding access to plant-based foods in school cafeterias, one of the first things that she said to us is that we need to be working on student education and outreach, and that for that kind of initiative to be successful, that it really needs to be partnered with student outreach and student education. And my team and I have been very successful with that over the last 2.5 years. We've designed lessons that were part of the advisory curriculum at the high school. We designed a lesson that was part of the 5th grade climate fair that every 5th grader in the district engaged with. We've created posters that are in every cafeteria in the district. It's been a pretty extensive process, but I think it's also important to recognize, as I'm sure you all know, that there is student turnover, and that 5, 10, 15 years from now, there might not necessarily be a group of students at the high school who are going to work on that kind of student education and outreach, even as these policies stand and even as the programs that are serving more plant-based foods in the cafeterias continue. And like I recognize, like Sasha recognized, that kind of education is crucial to couple with those kinds of programs. So my team of students and I at the Warriors for Animal Rights Club at Brookline High drafted 2 bullet points that were modeled off of the 2018 version of the policy, which I believe many of you have via email. If you don't, I apologize. I can't really email it to you right now. I'm zooming in from my phone, but I'm sure someone on the call could get it to you. And really what it says in short is students will learn about the importance of plant-based eating for human health, for the environment, for animal welfare, and they'll learn how to structure healthy plant-based meals, and they'll learn about foods that can be important parts of plant-based meals and plant-based diets. So yeah, I think it's really important, and I really appreciate your consideration. Does anybody have any questions about that?
I would just like to support that suggestion and note that that's actually a part of the sustainability policy under food services, which explicitly states that the district will move towards plant-based food options, including initiatives such as Meatless Mondays. So I note that there's a change in the wellness policy stating that it will implement and adhere to the policies outlined in the sustainability policy. So I think Ezra's suggestion is merely to make more explicit that recommendation rather than to call for a change in the wellness policy.
Yes. and it's to couple with the with the policies in terms of what foods are going to be served in the cafeteria. It's to couple some education around that to kind of uphold it.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ezra.
Yes. Okay, so we do have another agenda item to get to, but before we do that, are subcommittee members comfortable with advancing this draft to the full committee? I certainly am. Stephen's nodding his head. So Stephen, would you like to move it?
I'd like to move it, yeah.
All right, and I'll second your vote, Stephen.
Yes.
I vote yes. Valerie?
Yes.
All right. So we will also be discussing this at full school committee tonight then. So thank you very much for everyone who put in a lot of effort to this, and we'll be addressing it again later tonight with the full group. All
Thank you
right,
for your
so-
time.
Thank you. So next up, we will be discussing inclusion in life of the school activities policy. And there are multiple drafts to look at here. I think that the most recent draft submitted by Mariah would be the best one for us to review because that incorporates almost everyone's changes.
1 second. I'll put it right up.
This one?
Yes, the one that has the red.
All the red,
Yes.
Right.
Also, Betsy, if you could promote Linda Monak as a panelist. Is Mariah still on as well?
She is. She was maybe going to be getting on her phone, but I still. I invited Linda as a panelist, but she hasn't accepted it yet.
Well, anyway, to go over, I'll start going over the draft. So the main,
Mariah's trying to.
Mariah says she's trying to speak, yeah.
Can you let her know? We should hear her. She's not.
We can't hear you, Mariah, if you're
trying
trying
to
to
hear you,
speak.
Mariah. I'll just start in the meantime. So one of the changes to this draft compared to the prior one is we added a specific explanation about who is making the determination of the level of accommodation to be provided. And that's the Office of Student Services in consultation with parents and caregivers and the IEP team.
Where's that?
That's on the first page, very first paragraph, bottom of the paragraph.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Some other changes, the list of examples of what counts as outside the school day activities. So extended day programs are explicitly mentioned, enrichment programs are explicitly mentioned. Another change regarding what's required of third-party providers, and this was mainly to address a point that you had made, Stephen, that ultimately, from the parent caregiver perspective, it doesn't really matter who bears legal responsibility. Parents and caregivers just want to know, will my child have the necessary accommodations? And so this policy is stating clearly that yes, one way or another, the student is to have the accommodations, and the Office of Student Services will work out with a third-party provider the specifics about who provides those accommodations, who pays for them. Now, there's also an annual report that would be submitted December 31st of each year to confirm that there are agreements in place between third-party providers and the district to ensure that accommodations are being provided and that state and federal law is being complied with. There's also the explicit mention about a termination clause for non-compliance, but as pointed out by several people at the last meeting, that doesn't necessarily help a student who's in a position where that student is not receiving necessary support. Terminate the program would mean that that student, along with all the other students, no longer have that activity. So a paragraph was added to address that concern by saying that any adversely impacted students will be made whole either by providing support to the non-complying program or putting the students in a comparable program.
What paragraph is that, David?
That is on the penultimate page, last paragraph that was texted out.
That's for the ability?
Correct.
Right, okay.
then to show that this is not only,
Could you share, would you mind
I
sharing?
was
with
sharing it. I'm sorry, I lost it. So give me 1 second to pull it back up.
as this policy is not intended solely for special education students, the very last page under the district-wide off-site programs section, we address how on a voluntary basis, but really aspiring to do it, will provide supports for students who live 1.5 miles outside their home school, where there's a townwide program that might be in North Brookline, for instance, and the student resides in South Brookline, exploring transportation options or adding additional sites. And there's the notification section at the end. That's substantially the same as the prior drafts.
Mariah, are you there now?
Can we promote Mariah, Betsy?
I hadn't had the chance to read through Mariah's comments, so I'm trying to do that now.
In the meantime, Ms. Monak, would you like to offer your input?
I really can't because I can't see the.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
And
we
it's
can hear you now,
significantly.
Mariah.
Okay, great.
It's significantly different than the last, the one that I was last shared with me. So I can't comment on it because I can't see the revisions.
You wanna-
You're not sharing it on the screen.
Well, based on the draft that you reviewed, what were some of your thoughts?
I think I think several of them have been addressed from the little bit that I saw as we were flashing through. I had a concern. I mean, extended day is obviously one of the biggest things. So I think being much more explicit about it, which it looks like Mariah captured that. I did have a concern for, oh, there we go. For out-of-district students, a lot of out-of-district students come from programs that are not in their home school, and the use of homeschool, if we're allowing them to be part of the school full day, it would be the school from which they came or their home school, whichever they want. Because for instance, if I'm in the Runkle Rise program and I end up going out of district and I want to be part of after school activities, I'd want to do it with the students I went to school with at Runkle, but that might not be my home school. So that was a little nitpick. It wasn't clear to me whether BEEP was included in this, so I don't know if that's been fixed. My concern in general was this mandate that third parties accommodate all students, and sort of looking at the most extreme cases of that, that can be you need to have trained one-to-one paraprofessionals, you need to have nursing staff. This is a lot of infrastructure to put into them, so I'm not sure how that's going to be monitored, who's going to be responsible for making sure the paraprofessionals get trained for one-to-one, who's going to make sure the nursing staff knows how to do feeding tubes, things like that. You have to sort of think of the most extreme case, and then what happens if that paraprofessional is not available that day and calls out sick, then the kid doesn't have access to extended day. So kind of the sort of most extreme case of that, but I don't know how that's in here. And
Hey, Linda, before you go on, can I ask you 2 questions?
yeah, you can ask me any questions.
So first, does homeschool refer to the school that a student currently attends?
I don't know what homeschool is, so maybe we need to define it. Does homeschool mean the school that that student geographically is assigned to, or does it mean?
So it's just
I
not
assumed it was geographic, right?
Okay, so it's not a term that has a widely understood definition.
Right. So we should probably define what homeschool means, and maybe it's an either or. Either your closest geographic or the school that your student most recently attended, because not all out of district kids.
And the second question is, in a complicated case like the kind that you were just describing, what do you think? Does that lead you to think? What conclusion does that lead you to? Does that lead you to the thought that a different body should be deciding, or another conclusion altogether?
I don't know that it leads me to a conclusion, Stephen. I think it's more a real concern, because if an extended day program has to hire 3 paraprofessionals and a nurse in order to be in compliance with this, some of those programs aren't going to be willing to do that and will just go elsewhere. Or they're going to raise the tuition for all students to an extent. And I'm worried about the backlash on my community of if this affects the program overall, if programs aren't even offered because it's too difficult to do it in Brookline because of 1 or 2 of those students, quote unquote, backlash on the disabled community is a real thing. And we've seen it in Brookline. So is there a possibility of sharing expense for students with significant needs, PSB with the third party versus putting it all on the third party?
So Linda, just to be clear, it's not all on the third party. It's to be worked out between the third party and the district, however they see fit in negotiating the contract. However, from the parent perspective, there's a guarantee that the support will be in place. Who pays for it is secondary. That's between the district and the third party, but not necessarily on the third party.
David, can you just direct us again to the language on this, just so we
Okay,
can.
that wasn't clear in the draft I
That's
saw.
not what's written in my draft. At least not for extended days. For extended days, what I wrote is that it's the responsibility of the district to either provide the staff or provide funding to the extended day to pay for the accommodations.
Okay, that's different than the draft I saw. I apologize, Mariah.
No, but I think that
Working
even
on
the
old info.
conversation now, for extended days, I think we have to be clear that they're in a whole separate category than these other things. And that one I made very clear. The other ones are I think David's summation of it is accurate. For extended days, it's different. It's
So this is currently the 3rd paragraph on page 3, right? In the case of extended days.
Yes, exactly.
Can we actually just take a minute to take a look at that paragraph just to get into the weeds on this?
Yeah.
I know, I'm sorry, we don't have a lot of time. Okay, I just want to, so Mariah, can you walk us through what you actually wrote for this paragraph?
Yeah, can I actually pull up my version because it's not shown in this strike through version. It's a little, maybe it's easier to read. Is that okay?
Or maybe we could just change yeah, sure.
Okay.
Thanks, Mariah.
Sure. Sorry, give me 1 sec here.
Just trying to do this.
Can you see the screen okay?
Yeah, you might
Okay.
want to make it larger though, Mariah.
You don't like it minuscule? Okay. I did make it single space too because I couldn't process. Well, I guess that came through on that one. So here's the section on third-party compliance, and you can see there's a lot of stuff deleted here, but this is the paragraph of in the case of extended days. And basically the idea in this particular paragraph is that OSS works with each program before the start of the school year to identify the students whose IEPs would require accommodations, and that staffing or other requirements are the responsibility of the district to provide either the staff or the funding. And that OSS, basically then the last sentence is basically about for students who transition onto IEPs during the school year, OSS also works with each program to evaluate the needed accommodations for them as well.
So that would speak to Linda's concern.
I don't know if it hits all of it, but it hits some of it at least.
Well, okay, right.
And then if you go to the paragraph right above it, that's referring to essentially everything else.
So David, I still have the question I had on this paragraph, I think the last time we met about it, which is, this is complex, right? I mean, I think it's stated there right in the paragraph. How does that work when it's, say, an 8-week course, right? Like, how is the student ensured participation if it is an extended day, it's not a full year program? How do we ensure that they actually are able to participate and that the time frame doesn't just fly by without the accommodation?
I wrote something about that here, which is in the case of programs that are less than full year, accommodation should consider explicitly the feasibility of staffing. And it's not an answer, it's almost a punt because this is impossible to sort out, in my opinion.
There would still be the part in the paragraph as saying essentially to find a comparable program. Now, that's not always going to happen, but it is a potential option. And then also Mariah's addition. So I think those start to address it. I'm not sure how much further we could go though to make it foolproof. Do you have some suggestions, Val?
I mean, I'm just wondering why we wouldn't have OSS work on that, right?
They should. That's there. But the reality is that if I'm making this up, imagine it's a one-off something or other. There may be someone who, I don't know. I just think that like staffing is the hugest challenge, as Linda alluded to a minute ago in this. And there may be times in which the correct constellation of staffing supports may not be possible given the time frame of the program, the lead time with which someone wants to sign up to it, and many other things. And it can be everyone's desire to make it work, and it's still not possible.
All right, we do need to end the meeting because we're right up against school committee that starts at 6. Nevertheless, I do think that this is an important discussion for us to continue to have. So I would still like to move that we recommend the Mariah draft to full school committee. That way we can continue the discussion later this evening. It's already docketed if we recommend to full committee. And furthermore, to address a concern that you sent, Ms. Monak, earlier, just because we start the discussion doesn't mean that's the draft that ultimately gets voted in and enshrined in policy.
Right.
Typically, we have at least 2 readings by the full school committee before a policy is adopted. And there's nothing sacrosanct about the number 2. It could be a 3rd reading and a 4th reading even. So I would like to move that we advance the Mariah draft to full committee for purposes of broadening the discussion to the whole committee and continuing what we were starting to talk about in this one.
David, can I provide a counterpoint for not advancing it?
Sure.
Okay, just that this has not gone to extended days. Linda, on behalf of CPAC, has barely seen it. And I feel like we really need legitimate engagement from the multitude of providers who participate in out of school time and CPAC particularly. But I just feel like they need and I apologize. We've all, I'm sure, had crazy weeks and I couldn't get to this until today. But I feel like it sends the wrong message if we send it up and people really haven't had time to digest it or even see it at all or know about it. So.
All right, that's fine. But I don't want to sit on this for too much longer in terms of the whole committee. So hopefully we'll have something ready by the next subcommittee meeting. All right.
Yeah, and I just want to add in, I know we've got to go, but one other thing that I mentioned in my email is that the amount of work that you're adding to Office of Student Services, I think you're adding an FTE. Like, I think we would need to really think about who's going to manage this oversight of third-party vendors, because this is a huge amount of work for Office of Student Services. And I don't think there's a lot of people who are really bored in that group. So, and who have a lot of extra time. So I do think we need to consider what that means to the Office of Student Services as a bigger question.
All right, is there any new business? Seeing none, thank you very much, everyone, for joining this abbreviated meeting, and see many of you again upstairs in a moment.